Hello, this is Pat Cahill from Pat Cahill Metalworks, and today we're going to make a sword, and we're going to incorporate the tube set rubies that we had made in the other episode, the last episode. So let's get started. So I drew a basic outline of my sword here, and I'm going to cut that out, and we'll work from there. So first step is to saw out the outline, and as usual I'll do most of that off camera and I'll get back to you. Okay, so it's all cut out, and I want to put a fuller on this thing, so that's a groove down the center of the blade. Some people think it's so the blood will flow better, but it's actually just to lighten up the blade so it's easier to swing. So what I'm going to do is, there's many ways you can do this. One of the ways is you can take an engraving tool and scrape out your fuller, but this one's a little bit easier. I think it's a little bit easier, and what I do is I just round it off, or re-straighten it later on a ring mandrel. Alright, it doesn't need to be totally rounded. We're not making a ring here, so that now gives me a way to saw in a nice groove, a nice straight groove, to allow me to make the fuller, and you'll see how that goes. So let's move this over a little bit. So we have this rounded off. We can see a white line where we want the groove to be, and then we just take our saw and carefully saw it right in the center, going slow and following that center, so you're not seeing this part. Maybe if I put my hand out of the way. But again, I'm just making a nice groove. I'm going to flip this over so I can get up tighter to the handle of the sword we're making. And we don't want to go up too much, but just a little bit more. Okay, so that's our initial groove. And right now we can take off a piece of paper, which is what I'm going to do now. Sometimes these come off really easy, and sometimes they stick real good. They usually don't stick at all when you want them to stick real good, and they stick real good when you don't, but that worked out perfectly. So here it is, and you can see our initial groove we have for the fuller. And what we're going to do now is clamp this up. I'm going to grab a triangular file and try to deepen this groove just carefully. And what you want to do is make it deeper in the middle, and sort of, as you get towards the end, just sort of let it just become much shallower, like it's just fading out. Go light at the end, and then try to get it deeper in the middle. Sorry for the squeaks. Oof. Alright, so I'm going to finish this up a little bit more off camera, and I'll get back to you. Our next step will be to flatten it, and then start working on the edges. So first I'm going to take care of the fuller, and then I'll bring you back. And you won't have to hear these squeaks. Okay, so I'm flattening out right now. You can go on the other side too. And that's sitting quite nice and flat. So we'll go on to the next step. And the next step is to clean up our edges. We clean up the edges before, I want to clean up the edges before I start to make the edges of the blade. So just go around with a nice file, taking out the saw marks. Shouldn't have to worry about this too much. Just, you know, you just want to take out most of the stuff and try to keep it as uniform on both sides as possible. If you see a little bit of something that seems a little out of place, you're never going to get it really perfect unless you're a machine, but it'll look great in the end. Okay, so I'm going to go around and finish up the sides, and then I'll bring you back for the next step. Okay, so I have all the sides. They've all been filed, and I've given them a light sanding, and we're ready for the next step. So the next step is to sort of put an edge on each side of the blade, and this can be done with a file or a sandpaper, but I'm going to use a file. I prefer using files mostly. So again, using your block and going along. Again, long even strokes. So I'm going to finish this up a little bit more. Actually, I'm going to sand it a bit right now. Of course, sandpaper at first. And then we'll go to the final sandpaper. So there we have the start of it. Again, you don't want to bring it down so it's a knife edge here. I think I can bring it down a little bit more, and I probably will. And let me do that, and then we'll get to the next step. Okay, so we're at the next step, and the next step is to actually, well, you can take these things in any order you want, but the next step I'm going to do is put in the grips, or the illusion of grips. So, actually, best to have my optivisors on it this time. You want them, and I hope you can see, I'm going to be right down on it. You want these marks to be pretty much the same distance apart and slightly at a slant. Okay. And there we have it. Now, just to accentuate it a little bit, you can take your triangle file again and go over them. It also cleans them up a little bit too. And I like to go around. So incorporate the edge into the, give it a more 3D appearance. Now we have the basics of our sword. And what do we need to do now? Well, we need to think about what we want to do. So let me bring the camera over here. Let's go out a little bit. And so I was thinking I would take my two tube set rubies, and we're going to poke them down. They're not going to sit up like this. They're going to be almost flush with the, just a little bit above. And that can be done when you put it into the magnesium block that we'll be using to solder it on. So what I'll want to do next is take a round file and round off these edges here so that I'll have a good contact between the tube set rubies and the arm guard of the sword. Yep. So I have it set up now for soldering. I'm doing it on the bottom side so that if there are any solder blobs, I can sand those right off. And it also gives a little bit more protection to the rubies. So we'll start by, again, heating up the big piece. And be careful, sometimes your solder will move. Did on this side a little. And just go around. Make sure that these are all standing up straight. And that one moved a little. They're both soldered. There we go. Okay, so now into the pickle. And I'll be right back. Okay, so it's been soldered on, and the next step is to make these flush with the back surface. So I'll start out with a file, and I'll finish with sandpaper. So there's really not much to see here. I'm just going to file it down so it's flush. And then I'm going to sand the back so it's all nicely finished. So let me do that off camera, and we'll get back to you. Okay, so I have the back all flush. There's no solder marks or anything like that. It's nicely done. There's the front. So now, it's pretty much a finished sword, but what are you going to do with it? Well, I'm going to make a pendant out of it. So the first step to that will be to make a hole in the pommel at the top of the sword. So I'm going to just use my center punch. Try to get it in the center. go with a small hole at first, and then you can make it bigger as you go along. So okay, so there's our initial hole, and I want to open that up a bit. And that looks good. We're going to put a jump ring through that, and on top of that we'll put a chain through it. You're not seeing this, are you? Well, this is how you get 2 pliers on either side of your jump ring, and you sort of squeeze it in there, making it actually, pushing it towards it, going back and forth until you get a nice seal. So the next step is to polish this and blacken these areas, and that's what I'm going to do, and I'll bring it back and show you the final product. That's where she sits right now. We're going to use a snake chain. This is just a commercially available one. Making chain, one can do it, and one of these days I'll show you making chain, but you can't make snake chain. You need a machine to do that. So there are some parts I don't do by hand. Chains typically not. I have made chains, and like a Cuban chain, stuff like that. Those are fun to make. Maybe I'll make one of those for you online. So I'll be right back. Okay, so here's our finished piece. It's on an 18-inch snake chain, the lobster clasp. But I think it looks quite nice. Again, the front, the back. I'm not showing it off very well, but there it is. So, thank you again for joining me, and I hope to see you again real soon. Thank you. Goodbye.